To the soul with Archie B. Mike. Anthony's here too, let's ride the hype. Bigfoot's on the run, Area 51's tight. Digging deep for truth, we ain't afraid to fight. Black Earth theories got us spinning wild. JFK secrets hidden in the files. Illuminati whispers, fashion crooked smiles. I won't tune in, sit back and stay a while. Conspiracy chaos, we uncover the lies. Deep state shadows, yeah they can't disguise. We're cracking codes, watch the truth arise. Let the chaos reign, tearing through the skies. CIA plots under moonlight schemes. Hidden agendas ain't as crazy as they seem. Voices in the dark amplifying dreams. Conspiracy chaos, nothing's what it seems. Follow the breadcrumbs, follow the light. In the rabbit hole with us, pitch black night. RGB and Mike, guided by our might. Anthony with wisdom, out of sight. Conspiracy chaos, we uncover the lies. Deep state shadows, yeah they can't disguise. We're cracking codes, watch the truth arise. Let the chaos reign, tearing through the skies.
Let's go. We're back with another episode of Conspiracy Chaos. My name is RGB. Joining me as always, my co-host, Area 51 Anthony and Florida Mike. What's up, fellas?
What's going on, boys? How we doing?
Good, man. We got a banger of an episode here today. I recently heard a recent interview he did on our first guest, Mark Steve's podcast. My family thinks I'm crazy, and this was down my pipeline, guys. You guys know I'm a big fan of the TV show Oak Island. I love the Skull and Bones. I love all the occult type shit like that, the Freemasons. So our guy Ernie from Virginia Conspiracy Lovers is joining us. Ernie, thanks for joining us, pal. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, I was really interested in your interview with Mark. And I'd love to dive down that rabbit hole here on Conspiracy Chaos, man. So the floor is yours. Let's hear a little bit about William and Mary and
cool
Oak Island, Freemasons, the whole 9 yards. Let's see what you got.
There's a lot of it. Virginia itself is just kind of a huge nexus of all like conspiracy. That's why we did this like specific regional conspiracy show. Virginia is for conspiracy lovers, because I started noticing all these kind of regional conspiracy shows like Appalachia, and there's stuff from out in California, New York, and whatnot. And then, and nobody ever really talked. Virginia always makes like a cameo in stuff, but like, I mean, most of where a lot of things started were in Virginia. I mean, we've got, it's funny. I keep this rundown next to me for when we talk to people, but and I've said it a few times, but we've got the most CIA in the country is in Virginia, the most defense contractors, top 5 most NASA contractors, most military, only second behind California, most defense research facilities. We spent $68.5 billion in defense last year. We've got the Air Force Research Laboratory, Langley Air Force Base, NASA's Langley Research Center, Naval Weapons Station, Camp Perry, which is the farm we were talking about before we started recording. We have Mount Weather, which is the continuity of government underground base outside of DC. We've got the largest Navy base in the entire world, any country, any military. The Norfolk Naval Base is the largest base in the world. Top 5 most haunted states, top 3 most UFOs, oldest college, home of the first secret collegiate secret society, home of Greek letter fraternities were created at William and Mary. Most presidents: George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, James Monroe, James Madison, Zachary Taylor, Woodrow Wilson, all of them Masons. Most politicians, capital of the Confederacy, most Civil War generals, both sides came from.
That's crazy.
Yeah, lots of them were Masons.
I picked up the haunted part, and I just thought of Roanoke, Virginia.
Oh yeah,
and a lot of history over there. We don't have to get
Well,
into that right now, but
no,
Roanoke
it's
is
okay. I
crazy.
mean, but you've got 2 Roanoke's in Virginia, and both of them are haunted. And actually, one is now North Carolina. Roanoke, the Roanoke Island story, that
Mhm.
was Virginia at the time, but most of the East Coast was Virginia at the time. But that's part of North Carolina, Outer Banks
Okay.
area. And then you've got Roanoke up northwestern part of the state, and that is an older town too. That's like super haunted.
That's
We
the
got
one that was the American Horror Story. The episode, there was a season.
Yeah,
Taken after Roanoke.
yeah. I just tried to find that. I couldn't figure out which season it was. I never watched that series, but somebody said something about Roanoke being featured in it, and I couldn't
it's a
figure
good
out which
one.
one it was.
That show is crazy.
Yeah, it was disturbing. I watched the second season recently, and it got me, dude. I was like, God, it doesn't stop. Like
Some
every
of it
other
is a
episode.
little-
Just
Some of it is just a little
nonstop.
too much. That's what I was gonna say. It's a little too much, and like
Yeah.
it's like a little like it doesn't stay with a story. Sometimes it just
No.
goes like it goes.
Yeah, it
from
doesn't
one-
finish anything. It just keeps adding and
Yes,
adding and
yes,
adding. Dude. It's like
exactly.
too much, man. I was
But
having a
Did
panic
you guys
attack.
see the circus series one was wild.
Yeah,
with
I
the
want to watch
clown.
that. I used to love that show, Carnival on HBO. But
Oh yeah.
so yeah, that's why we decided to do Virginia's for conspiracy lovers, is because it's everything from deep state to NASA and UFOs to hidden history. Francis Bacon. I'm convinced Francis Bacon is responsible for the creation of this country, and he started off with the Virginia Company of London and sending the boys over here in 1607 to get it all started.
Wow, you said okay. That's a cool little theory. Yeah.
Yeah.
I always heard that he's like Shakespeare. They always
100. So we can go. I mean, we can wax poetic on that too, because that's what got me into the hidden history side of conspiracy. Is I grew up with my mom dragging me to 2 Shakespeare plays a year since I was like 9 years old. Because coincidentally, at Phi Beta Kappa Hall at the campus of William and Mary is like one of the largest Shakespeare festivals like in the country every year. And so I've been going, I didn't understand it when I was a kid, but you go to that many plays, you start to understand that old English. And when I first heard about, I was in my 20s, I guess, that I heard that there was some sort of question about whether Shakespeare was actually the author. I was like, well, no way. I can't believe that. I've seen all these plays. It's incredible. He's responsible for most of the English language as we know it today. And I started looking into it, and I immediately ran into Christopher Marlowe, who was my daughter's name is Marlowe after Christopher Marlowe. That's how obsessed I am with it. But Christopher Marlowe was this really rad guy who was a playwright around the same time as Shakespeare. And he was actually, turns out, from what they can tell, he was probably a spy of some sort working with John Dee and Queen Elizabeth, because he wrote a couple of plays. He went to Oxford or Cambridge, I can't remember which one, and he passed everything with flying colors and was about to graduate and get his degree. And they told him he had missed too many days. I guess they had attendance policy back then, and they weren't going to give him his degree. And still to this day, they have the letter from Queen Elizabeth I to the college saying, no, you're going to let him graduate, because all the days that he missed, he was in my employ. And then Christopher Marlowe, he was kind of a badass. He was constantly getting like arrested for like duels and being drunk and heresy. And, they considered anything heresy back then. And one of the last times he got arrested, he got bailed out, presumably by the court, somebody with the Queen or in that milieu. And he gets out, and like a day or so later, He gets drunk with a friend of his at a tavern, goes back to his buddy's house. And then the story that his buddy told was they got into a fight, a drunken fight that they can't remember, that his buddy couldn't remember, but that he stabbed him in the face, killed him, and then buried him somewhere on his property, but he couldn't remember where he buried him.
Shit.
And really, I think, and what the theory is that Christopher Marlowe was basically making too many waves, and people were starting to realize that he was involved with the queen and the monarchy in some way, and she couldn't have him acting a fool, and so they basically exiled him. And if you read Shakespeare chronologically as it is written, it's almost written, the settings of each play are almost written like somebody taking a tour around Europe in a specific order, with like plays about like Scotland and England mixed in. So it'll be like geography, unless I'm looking at a map, is terrible, but in order it'll be like Italy, Spain, blah 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 blah, all the way down in through like around in Rome and whatnot, and then interspersed in there you've got like the king like King Lear and Macbeth and things like that, like mixed in. And then so I got into the Shakespeare question. I was convinced it was Christopher Marlowe, and then the more and more I read, the more I found out that this Francis Bacon guy kept popping up in all of it. And he was, theoretically, he was probably trained in some of the more secretive, darker kind of things by John Dee. There's not a ton of evidence that supports that, but there is this really wild, like wood engraving from that time, and it shows John Dee passing, I think, a scroll or maybe a lantern or something like that. To people have speculated that it is Francis Bacon, him kind of passing the torch of that kind of occulted, esoteric teaching, because after John Dee kind of faded away, Bacon almost kind of took that role within the court of Queen Elizabeth I. And then, of course, he kind of had a falling out with Queen Elizabeth, and because of his friendship with the Duke of Essex, who, I mean, we go hard in any direction as far as this goes. Francis Bacon, wild dude, created the scientific method, was into alchemy, and he was a master code writer and cipher writer, and he wrote and wrote and wrote. The dude, they say that he had written, or he had read everything in print by the age of 12. By 14, he was at Cambridge. By 15, he left Cambridge early because he was bored, and by 16, he was back at Cambridge teaching.
Damn.
Yeah, contemporaries said that Francis Bacon made like Plato and Aristotle look like dum-dums. He was quite possibly the most brilliant guy to ever walk the face of the planet. And he just, so there's all that, and you can get way in the weeds with Francis Bacon, and most likely he's involved very heavily, if not one of the creators of Rosicrucianism, which of course is a precursor to the Royal Society, and the Invisible College, which of course is a precursor to Freemasonry.
And that's the night. So that's what I was going to ask you. So once he parted ways with Queen Elizabeth, isn't that where he started the Knights? Was he the one who started the Knights Templar?
No, they're way back. So the Templars were, they got kicked off in the First Crusade.
Okay.
Like a year into the First Crusade, maybe earlier, but within the First Crusade, 9 second sons of noble French families, 9 knights who were second sons back then. If you were the second born son, you didn't get anything. You weren't worth a crap. You weren't going to get the title. I mean, you'd get lands and inheritances and stuff like that, but if your daddy was a duke, you weren't going to be the duke when your dad died. Your older brother was going to be.
Gotcha.
So a lot of times, in order for them to make a name for themselves, for the guys who wanted to, they would become knights, and they would go out and they would fight, and they would join these chivalric orders and whatnot. And so when the Crusades kicked off, they the opportunity to do that kind of in real time presented itself. And there's some speculation as to why they did, because these were the 9 knights who started the Knights Templar were 9 of the 9 second sons of some of the highest noble families in France. And the Crusades had already been going on, and they show up in the Holy Land and immediately meet with at that point they had taken the Christian forces had already taken the Holy Land and they had taken over Jerusalem and actually installed a king of Jerusalem, and I can never remember the guy's name. I think it starts with a B. But so they have this king of Jerusalem, this European king of Jerusalem. They've kicked the Muslims out and they're there. So these 9 knights show up and they talk with the king, and he immediately sets them up with their own kind of pad on the Temple Mount, like literally right where Solomon's temple would have been. And I want to say at the Dome of the Rock. And it's inferred by a lot of the research and whatnot that they basically didn't, that first year, there wasn't many of them, and they didn't do much fighting at all. They excavated, supposedly they excavated underneath the Dome of the Rock, which was where the original Solomon's temple was. And what's interesting is that at a certain point they just up, and all the knights that they'd recruited while they were there and the 9 originals, they just pack their stuff up and go straight to go see the Pope. And within a very short time after meeting with the Pope comes out with a papal bull saying, all right, these Knights of the Temple are they're made men. This order answers to no king or queen on earth. They only answer to God and to me. They pay no taxes. They have no loyalties to any country. Right. And so then they go back to the Holy Land, and it's almost like their front for their whole mission over there was this idea that they were protecting pilgrims on the route to the Holy Land. And they did, but I don't think, and a lot of people don't think, that's what they were necessarily there for. They did create modern banking, basically, and like the kind of credit and checking system that we use today, because you would have some, say it was like some English nobleman had a whole bunch of money over in London, and he wanted to visit the Holy Land, which is now opened up to Europeans because they control it. But you need a whole bunch of money to make that long journey to the Holy Land. And so the Templars, they had this vow of poverty. So when you came in, everything was taken care of, your meals and everything. That's also why their emblem, or their seal, their original seal, is 2 knights on 1 horse. It was supposed to represent like poverty. You're coming in and your entire life goes to the order. Well, that meant that when all these noble second sons and whatnot came in and wanted to become a Templar, they had to give all of their titles and their land and everything to the order. So within a matter of a few decades, they become the most powerful entity on the planet, militarily, politically. They have tons of connections in every country. They have all their members, all their brothers' money, all their lands. Now they can farm. They can produce textiles and food, and they have people farming for them all over the known world. And so what they would do is they would set up these preceptories all over where they had land. So these little, sometimes they were cathedral, like small, like chapel churches. Sometimes they were like they were forts. Sometimes they were small little like strongholds. And so if you wanted to go to the Holy Land, you could go to the local Templar preceptory and say, all right, here's, $200,000 or whatever. I want to go to the Holy Land. And they say, cool, they take your money, they give you like a coded, I've heard it explained as a coded like wood token, or they had a chit system. And they were around for a couple hundred years, so it probably changed. And then as you would burn through the supplies you had, you'd get to another area along the journey, you'd hit up the next Templar stronghold, you'd get some more money, some more supplies, and you keep moving on. And that made them incredibly powerful. And then you know, these knights are from, and I swear this kind of connects to, it really does connect to Virginia and William and Mary, but like, you know, a lot of these knights who were in the Order of the Temple were Southern French knights from noble Southern French families, and they, you know, that comes into the Merovingian bloodline, and the Merovingian bloodline is the bloodline that were kings and queens, I want to say in the 700 to 900, so before the Crusade. But it was before the Crusade, but then these French families pop up and create the Knights Templar, and the Merovingian bloodline is the supposed bloodline of the child of Christ and Mary Magdalene. And so they had this divine idea of the divine right of kings, and they were kings of many different like countries and areas, and dukes and earls and whatnot. And that's what makes it interesting that these 9 knights cruised over to the Holy Land and then started digging, looking for something, almost like they had some knowledge from their ancestors who claimed that they were of the bloodline of Christ. So you got the Merovingians to the Templars, and then the Templars get outlawed in 1307. They disperse. They take off from La Rochelle, a southern French port, with a whole bunch of all their loot. They never really found much of the Templar treasure that existed in all these different places all over the world. But I think it was 18 ships, Templar ships, took off from La Rochelle, theoretically loaded down with all their stuff, possibly religious relics, the Spear of Destiny, which was found underneath the altar in the supposedly found underneath the altar in the Antioch church, the first century cave church in Antioch after the fall of Antioch during the Crusades. All this stuff and all their money, they take off. They're kind of underground for a few hundred years, and then some of their principles and things start popping up with people like John Dee and the Rosicrucians. And then you've also got the stories. We know that a lot of them ended up in Scotland and were, you know, there's a great story about how they helped Robert the Bruce win the final battle that granted Scotland its independence. The Battle of Bannockcock. I think that's right, but anyway, so they're heavy in Scotland, and meanwhile they're outlawed in 1307, and they kind of spend a little time in Scotland, and they're kind of sheltered there. They help win Scottish independence. Maybe some people argue that, some people argue that never happened. But we do know that there's a ton of Templar symbolism all over their cathedrals and stuff, dating from the between the 1300s and the 1600s in Scotland. And then
you were close, by the way. There's Bannockcock. There's
Bannockcock
burn.
I forgot the burn.
You forgot the burn. Yeah, you were close.
So they so in that in-between time before Francis Bacon and when they were outlawed in 1307, they're heavy in Scotland, and they're mixing with a lot of Merovingians. Ended up the Bruce family, Robert the Bruce from Braveheart fame, is that is part of the Merovingian families, the Bruce family, and they become the first kings of a free Scotland, right? And all that time, they're kind of Scotland's got their freedom. And then they start bleeding into the families, kings and queens of different countries. They're all intermarrying their daughters and sons off. And at a certain point, the Stuart line, which comes from the Bruce line, ends up marrying into the kings and queens of England's line. And then after Henry VIII, I believe it was his sister was married into a Stuart.
Rothschild all married within each other too. They all.
Yeah.
They all,
for sure. It's all bloodlines, and I know that sounds like old hat and like cliche in the conspiracy world, but the more and more I look at this stuff, the more and more I realize that it's the simplest answer is the best, and it's just bloodlines. And if you listen to somebody like Gary Wayne, who's like a biblical scholar and really digs down into the Nephilim and the Enochian, like the book of Enoch and whatnot, he can kind of take these bloodlines and funnel them all the way down to the original like Canaanite tribes. And the Canaanite tribes, of course, are the tribes that branch off of Noah's family after the flood. And they're all the guys where all the giants and things come from in the biblical times. So there was this supposed incursion of the Nephilim in before the flood, and then God sends the flood to wipe out the Nephilim, the abomination that's corrupted the earth, but somehow they're still on the earth after the flood, and somehow through Noah's son Canaan. And so anyway, I can go off on a million different tangents. Let's get back to Francis Bacon.
I love it.
I love it.
So Francis Bacon, really, Elizabeth dies and James the First becomes the King of England. Now James the First is the Scottish king. He's James the Fifth in Scotland, and then becomes the King of England as James the First, right? And his mother was Mary, Queen of Scots. Now when King Henry the Eighth died, the guy who like split up Catholicism and England, he like wanted to divorce his chick, who was everybody was Catholic back then. He wanted to divorce his chick, and the Catholic Church wouldn't let him because she came from a really high up Catholic noble family. That's when Henry VIII splits and the Church of England is created. And so Mary, Queen of Scots, at the time, she had a better claim to the throne when Henry VIII died. But they kept her kind of subdued and then kept running through all of King Henry VIII's children. He had a son who didn't live very long. He died young. And then Bloody Mary became the Queen of England, and she brought Catholicism back to England because she was married to King Philip of Spain, Catholic. And that's when they come back in after the kind of Reformation and start killing all the Protestants in England. And then she dies, and her half sister takes over. That's Queen Elizabeth I. Now, Queen Elizabeth I, her only claim to the throne was that she was the king's daughter, but she was the king's daughter with Anne Boleyn. Anne Boleyn was not of noble blood, and she was the chick that King Henry wanted to get with after he divorced his Catholic wife, right? So right at that point, when Queen Elizabeth is next in line to the throne, then there's a big to-do. Like this girl over here, Mary, Queen of Scots, the Queen of Scotland at the time, she actually has a better claim to the throne because she was the daughter of King Henry VIII's sister. Anyway, they don't give her the throne. They end up locking her up and killing her in England. They like trick her, capture her, and then cut her head off. And Queen Elizabeth is the queen. She's the Virgin Queen. That's why Virginia is called Virginia. It's named after Queen Elizabeth. Now, the theory is that she wasn't a virgin queen. There's a lot of like salacious stories about Queen Elizabeth,
None of them are.
including, huh?
None of them are.
That's right. So, one in particular is that Francis Bacon is the illegitimate child of Queen Elizabeth. Now, just a few months before Francis Bacon is born, you can go back in the records in England and find where a bunch of people out in the outskirts of London got their tongues cut out and their heads cut off and hung because they went back to they had gone to court to visit the Queen and do their little thing at court, then went back to their villages and were like spreading rumors that, hey man, I don't think the Queen's a virgin anymore, man. She looks kind of pregged up. And that got found out and these people paid for it, right? Well, very shortly after that, Francis Bacon is born. Now, Queen Elizabeth, when her half sister Bloody Mary was the Queen of England, her half sister Queen Bloody Mary was so worried about Elizabeth trying to take the throne from her, she just put her half sister in the Tower of London and let her kind of rot there. Well, she was sitting in the Tower of London, basically in prison, a pretty cushy prison, but she was imprisoned, and right next door to her, sharing the Tower of London, was Lord Dudley's son, her childhood friend. And so the theory is, and there is supposed documented evidence, but people argue over whether it's real or not, that a priest was smuggled into the Tower of London and actually married Queen Elizabeth, or Princess Elizabeth at the time, and Dudley's son, Robert Dudley. Now, Dudley had been her father, Henry VIII's biggest advisor, and then obviously was kind of ousted after that. His son and his heir apparent and Queen Elizabeth are in the Tower of London. Supposedly they get secretly married, and the speculation is that the result of that is Francis Bacon. And it's interesting because as soon as she becomes the queen, she up jumps Dudley to a sir, moves her into the palace with him in an adjoining room to her palace room, and makes him her Lord of Horse. And literally she got with the stable boy kind of thing. And and the theory is that Francis Bacon is the son of Queen Elizabeth, because also now it's not Roger Bacon, it's Nicholas Bacon was Sir Francis Bacon's supposed father. Now Nicholas Bacon was also one of King Henry's, I think he was his he was big up in Henry VIII's court. And so he would have been an obvious ally for Elizabeth to kind of pawn this baby off on, this illegitimate kid on. And so the theory is that she has the kid. They say it's Nicholas and his wife's baby, but then Queen Elizabeth immediately moves the baby Francis Bacon into the palace and takes over his education, his upbringing, everything. He comes up in Queen Elizabeth's court. And then they think at a certain point he realizes that he was her son, and that's when things kind of go south, and he starts supporting the Duke of Essex, who would have been his cousin.
Your memory's like incredible. Your knowledge retention is incredible. Like I'm following along with this story, like scrolling through, like you're saying a name and then I'm typing it in and
looking it up. I'm doing the same thing.
It's fucking spot on. I'm like,
damn, that's good, because I never know sometimes, man. I don't write anything down, and the only way I remember this stuff is to corner unsuspecting people who don't want to hear it and just vomit it all out on them like I'm doing now. And then that's helped me remember.
Because I never heard of Nicholas Bacon, so I typed it in, and then I'm like, holy shit!
I believe that was his.
Like, everything you're talking about. I'm like,
that was his supposed father, right? That was
that was
Henry,
his alleged father. Yeah.
So so Francis Bacon comes up in her court. She does what she does to what, Mary Queen of Scots, the woman who had the better claim to the throne than the kind of bastard daughter of Henry VIII, who she beheads. That essentially, if Bacon finds out that he is Elizabeth's son, that's his cousin.
Heir. Cousin, yeah.
That's his cousin. Well, Elizabeth dies, and there was some agreement made with Mary Queen of Scots, and I think it was solely because she was Elizabeth was the Virgin Queen, and they wanted that some form of that Henry VIII line to continue on. So they made an agreement that Mary Queen of Scots' son would be the heir to the throne because Elizabeth didn't have an heir. So now the Stuart line is going to jump from Scotland over into England, and that starts with James. Well, as soon as James gets on the throne, Francis Bacon is back in the mix, and he becomes the Lord Chancellor, like the big swinging dong for James I. I think James I gets in the late 1590s, and then by 1607, they create the Virginia Company of London that had a big board. Francis Bacon was one of the head guys on the board of that company, and it's all solely to come over and explore the New World. Okay, so we're getting closer to Virginia and Williamsburg and William and Mary, I swear. And
this is fucking awesome, dude.
Thank you. So they come over, and so my entire thesis, and this has been helped along hugely by a guy named Court Lindahl, who I've been talking to for a while. He was on the podcast, and he's been on Oak Island a couple times. Oh yeah. So you should watch our episode with him. It's really awesome, and we should have another one coming up. I'm breaking down this poem that I found in a colonial Virginia governor's papers, and it's a poem that just screams of like Stuart line, Merovingian, Jacobite, like stuff, and nobody really knows if this guy was a Jacobite. So the whole my theory has changed just from Francis Bacon created the New World because he wanted a place. That's kind of one of the theories, that Francis Bacon was the scientist, this free thinker, this enlightened like kind of guy, and he basically in a roundabout way created the New World as a place for his ideas and his theories and things like that, and his desire to move beyond like a monarchy to kind of thrive, right? And that's what America became. And if you read his book, The New Atlantis, that came out after he died because he requested that it not be published until after he was dead. Now, he had published like hundreds of books and pamphlets and papers and things like that, but this one particular book, he asked that it not be published until after.
And he published them as Francis Bacon or William Shakespeare.
Yep.
You're saying?
No, he published that as Francis Bacon. My point with William Shakespeare, was that the more I got into looking into William Shakespeare, the more I started subscribing to this theory. You know, you've got several possibilities of people who were who could have been writers, Shakespearean writers, and from the 17th Earl of Oxford to Christopher Marlowe, to they even talk about Sir Philip Sidney's sister, the Countess of Pembroke, and then also Francis Bacon on top of that. All those people have been put forward as possible authors of Shakespearean plays. And I don't think it's an either or. I think that it's 100% it's all work by committee. And I think that Francis Bacon was and this isn't totally my theory, but it's the one that I subscribe to, is that Bacon was kind of the arbiter and the boss of this kind of cabal that created the works of Shakespeare. One, because a lot of the stuff in Shakespeare plays you couldn't say at that time. It's all commentary on the aristocracy. It's all commentary on the monarchy, on the laws, on foreign policy. You couldn't, at that time, you couldn't say those things and make fun of those people and make those kinds of jokes without getting in big trouble, right? Unless you were already a high up member of the court and you had powerful friends, or you did it in a somewhat clandestine way. None of those plays were attributed to Shakespeare while he was alive. It wasn't until after his death that they were attributed to that man. Everything that you read about William Shakespeare, everything that people have looked into about him, it doesn't even seem that he was literate. The guy at best only had a 7th grade education. His dad was illiterate. His mom was illiterate. His wife was illiterate, and all of his children were illiterate, right? In his will, he does not leave a book, a piece of paper, a pen, anything to anyone. There has never been found a letter or a book or anything sent to him, written to him. There's never been one piece of paper in his handwriting ever. And this guy's name was William Shagspar from Stratford upon Avon. His name isn't even William Shakespeare. It's Shagspar. He was from Stratford upon Avon, which is well outside of London. He came to London and got involved in, like, as an investment in the Globe. I believe it was the Globe or the Blackfriars Theater. I can't remember which. Maybe both. I don't know. But the only thing that there's only 7 examples of supposed Shakespeare handwriting that exist. And this isn't crazy. This isn't some like way far back thing. So like, there's not a lot like written by anybody from that time. No, there's tons of handwritten stuff by all kinds of authors from the Elizabethan era, but not from the guy who is responsible for basically creating the English language. Not to mention, like I said, his kids and his wife were illiterate. So the guy, the greatest writer in the history of the English language,
didn't teach them.
He didn't teach anybody. He left like his second, the only thing he left to his wife was his second best bed in the house. That, like, in his will. And
didn't even get the first bed.
Yeah, I don't know who got that, but she didn't. But the really interesting thing is that there's 7 examples of his supposed handwriting, but they're all signatures, and they're all misspelled, and they're all different handwriting. And they're all on contracts. 2 or 3 of them are on his will, and the rest of them are on, like, I think he was like a wool merchant of some sort. And that's what he originally came to London for. And so the idea, and what that really points to, is that whoever he was signing this contract to, and whoever his lawyer was for his will, signed the papers for him. So this guy didn't. I sincerely believe that Shakespeare didn't write anything. Now, when you also add to that all those people I talked about before, the 17th Earl of Oxford, Christopher Marlowe, Sir Walter Raleigh, the Countess of Pembroke, all these people were all part of a literary society that Francis Bacon created. Okay. And the name of this, it was kind of akin to the salon culture in France, where you couldn't really talk out loud about some of these ideas. You know, you couldn't really criticize the government or the church or anything back then. So you would create these little secretive, they weren't super uber like secret societies, the literary societies. They were just groups of people who thought similarly and were educated similarly, and they would get together and they would write papers and they would discuss things and debate things, right? And so Francis Bacon had one of these societies, and it was called the Society of the Helmet. And it was called the Society of the Helmet because their patron goddess for this society, or what they called their muse, was the goddess Athena. And goddess Athena was known to wear a helmet. She was the goddess of war and knowledge and something else too, like instruments or something. But she was known to wear her helmet and shake her spear of knowledge in the face of the beast of ignorance. Shake her spear. So that's where a lot of people pull the name Shakespeare from.
Wow.
And so within this group, you have all the people that Shakespeare plays are attributed to by all these other people. So to me, it was a no-brainer to just keep looking into Francis Bacon as being kind of the top-down guy, because he was the most senior when you're talking about intelligence. Now, the 17th Earl of Oxford was brilliant. The Countess of Pembroke was absolutely brilliant. She wrote plays. She wrote stuff that nobody ever read until hundreds of years later, because nobody cared, or it was thought to be like kind of uncouth to have a for just noble people in general, men and women, to be writers or playwriters and stuff. That was below their station. And especially for a lady of noble birth, that wasn't something you did. So anyway, that's the Shakespeare side of it, and the tie-in with Francis Bacon. And then he's part of this thing to come over and create the new world. And I guess what we could do now, since I've rambled for like an hour, is kind of get into the William and Mary stuff, if you want, because this kind of leads into it. And I'll skip over some history. I won't give you the entire history of Virginia.
No, break it down a little bit. Yeah, for sure.
Skip to quick William and Mary.
Yeah.
All right. So I need you to unlock, I think, or pull that up, or what do I do here? There we go.
There it is. See it already.
There we go. Okay. So I'm going to pull away from this real quick, just to talk real quickly about that Virginia Company of London, and kind of well, this is interesting. This kind of ties a little bit. So the Virginia Company of London, they do this 1607 voyage to the New World, right? To basically see what they can exploit, if it's possible to build a colony there, if what sort of natural resources there are, timber, and whatnot. Mostly they supposedly they wanted gold. I think it was I think it was a little more intense than that. I think that the Stuart family had basically seen how poorly they were treated in Scotland by the English, and they had to scratch and claw to finally get their independence. And then they had to scratch and claw to get into the throne of England. And I think they already knew with their first Stuart on the throne as the King of England, I think that they already knew the writing was on the wall, that this was going to be constantly contested. And sure enough, I mean, just a few decades after James, you have the Civil War, and Cromwell takes over the government of England, and they've got their little Commonwealth there. It doesn't last for very long. And so I think what the Stuarts and this Merovingian Christ bloodline line was looking for, and I think they kind of secretly set out to find a new place to set up their line and to kind of protect this Stuart line. And I think America was that, through Francis Bacon, a cousin of King James, and King James, who actually now had the power and the resources by sitting on the English throne to get that going. So 1607, they do the trip over. Now this is pretty interesting, right? So, well, never mind. I made a mistake. That's 2 years later in 1609. All right. 1607, they make it over. They come through the Chesapeake Bay, and they cruise up this river right here. Can you see my cursor?
Yep, we're following you.
All right. Yep. So this is the bay. This is the Atlantic, the bay. They come in. They choose this river to come up, and they cruise all the way up here. And when they get to this creek right here, which is now called College Creek.
Mhm.
The kind of the commander, you had Christopher Newport was like the naval commander of the expedition, but the kind of big swinging dong on the with the rest of the nobles and captains, there was a guy named Sir Gabriel Archer. Sir Gabriel Archer, his family goes back to Templar and Merovingian bloodlines. Okay, well, Sir Gabriel Archer decided that this was the creek that they were going to go up to put the fort, right? So they cruise up this creek all the way up here. This creek goes all the way up, and you can't see because of the development now, but it actually comes all the way up to the back of William and Mary, where William and Mary sits now.
Mhm.
And he was so they ultimately decided that this wasn't a good place for it, that it wasn't deep enough, and they couldn't turn the big ships around. But he was so adamant that this was where the fort should have been set, that this creek here was forever called College Creek, or I'm sorry, was forever called Archer's Hope, because it was his hope for where the fort should sit. And it wasn't changed until the 1920s, when the Rockefellers came in and did their big renovation of Colonial Williamsburg and William and Mary. And then that's when it changed to College Creek. Okay. So this is the campus of William and Mary, built. The charter was obtained in 1693. Now, in between 1607 and 1693, you've got a bunch of crap going on. You've got Jamestown, which is right around here-ish, maybe up here. No, that's a neighborhood. College Creek, it should be up here. Yeah, the James Fort should be up around here someday, where I can't, I should have had it pinpointed. Anyway, the Jamestown Fort, the triangular fort that everybody kind of knows the shape of, it's up and around here somewhere. Maybe up here. Anyway, it's not important. Between 1607 and 1693, I mean, you have the starving time. You have several supply missions that fail. You've got cannibalism within the fort. You've got Indian raids. You have the marriage of Pocahontas and John Rolfe. You've got John Smith takes off from the camp and spends the year just cruising around with the natives, meeting all the natives, mapping out the whole place. That's another guy who got a really bad shake. People talk about Captain John Smith as if he was a criminal. They paint all the guys who came over in the 1607 mission as basically criminals or ne'er-do-wells who really didn't have any other options, and so they were coming over to kind of start anew and maybe make their fortune. And really, that wasn't exactly John Smith. John Smith was a dude who was like, you guys watch Game of Thrones when it came out?
Yeah.
I was one of the only ones in my area that did not. So
Yeah, I actually,
seems like
I
these guys
didn't either. I don't. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, there's a guy in there named Sir Braun of the Blackwater. Okay, and he's what they call in the show a sellsword, and he was just a dude who would fight in any army and for any person for a price, right? Well, that's what Captain John Smith was before this mission. His story, and you got to be a nerd like me to read his entire works, which are available and didn't come out until far after the kind of history was already cemented. But John Smith, he fought for, I want to say, the Dutch as a sellsword. There's these great stories of him being somewhere over, I don't know, in Turkey or the Middle East or something like that, and literally about to lay siege to a castle or a stronghold, and the head of the army holding that stronghold is like, hey, let's not everybody die, that old school fantasy movie thing where, hey, you send out your best guy, we'll send out our best guy, and we'll settle it, and not everybody has to die, right? There's a great story about John Smith like murking like 3 dudes in one day. He kills one guy, cuts his head off, and sets it next to him, and then they send another guy out, and he kills that dude, cuts his head off, sets it next to him. By the end of it, he's got 3 heads sitting next to him, and the guy in the prince or whatever inside the castle or the stronghold goes, all right, I want that guy to be my commander. And so he becomes a commander for this guy, and then he gets into another battle and gets knocked out and kidnapped, and then he becomes a slave to some other prince, and then that prince's like sister falls in love with him, and so she has to take him to her palace. And so he's hanging out doing this thing with this prince's sister, and then the prince gets pissed off and comes to pick him up, and John Smith kills that guy, takes off on his horse through the desert, makes it to some body of water, jumps on a ship with some pirates, does some pirate shit for a little while, gets some booty, and then gets dropped back off in England, and then later on ends up being on the ships. Anyway,
Sounds like a good time.
That sounds like I mean, it sounds like he took every advantage of his life.
Yeah, John Smith was a really rad dude, and if he was just some criminal who didn't know his ass from a hole in the ground, it's kind of hard to believe what he did when he came over here. Like, everybody was in the James Fort and they were just dying. It was a bunch of aristocrats who or partial aristocrats who didn't know how to survive in these conditions. Horrible malaria, constant on and off fighting with the Indians. The Indians would they would help them, but then we'd do something to piss them off, and then they'd start coming after them. Well, while all that stuff's going on in that first little bit in Jamestown, John Smith takes off and maps the whole dang East Coast. And his maps they're beautiful, they're brilliant. So he wasn't a know nothing. Anyway, one interesting story before I get into this, really, really quick. Like I said, they kept dying and starving over in the Jamestown fort, right? And so they sent a supply mission over in 1608, and all that stuff. They didn't send enough stuff. They didn't send enough able-bodied men. A lot of those people died. They needed more supplies. So the Virginia Company of London, Francis Bacon in particular, mounts this big supply mission in 1609. He sends 7 ships over, 7 major ships and 2 pinnaces, which are smaller ships that were pulled behind some of the larger ships. Actually, one of my ancestors there was a ship called the Swallow, and my ancestor, I can't remember his name now, was actually the captain of one of those ships. We just found that out recently. It's pretty cool.
That's cool.
So they come from England, which is up in this area here. They come down around the Canary Islands and they head this way towards the East Coast, right? And when they get around Bermuda, this big 9-ship supply mission gets hit with a hurricane, okay? And all the ships are lost, or they all get separated. All the ships make it one by one to Virginia, except for a ship called the Virginia, which had actually been built in the New World. It took off 5 days into the trip. Nobody really knows why, and then shows up later at Jamestown, like a month later, and then disappears forever. Nobody ever knows what became of those people. The other ship that goes down is a small pinnace called the Ketch. Now, I think I may be the only one who's ever put this together, but the Ketch, you can find. Also, these 2 pinnaces were added last minute, so you can kind of find the manifests and like who was on what ships and what they had and how many people there were, except for the 2 small ships. The one that disappeared five days into the trip, and then this one that was lost forever. But the interesting thing that you can find is the name of the captain of that ship. And the name of the captain of the ship, the Ketch, was a guy named Matthew Fitch, right? So Matthew Fitch, I start looking into him. Well, it says in all the histories, it says that Matthew Fitch was the captain of the Ketch, and he was the same mariner who came over with Christopher Newport in the original 1607 mission. Well, except that if you read John Smith's accounts of what happened in 1607, Matthew Fitch dies getting shot in the chest with an arrow on a hunting expedition in July of 1607. But somehow he pops up in 1609 on this supply mission to refit the Jamestown. So he dies in 1607, but somehow makes it back to England, and 2 years later captains a ship. Okay,
What do you think happened?
Well, and I could get into this later. It goes back more into Francis Bacon stuff, but he I believe the catch. I think I've found some stuff when you look. So you break down how many people were in the mission as a whole, right? And you can figure out how many people were on all the large ships, and then what you're left with is about 100 people. And the size pinnace of that day, I love saying the word pinnace. There's no other word for it. It's a small ship, but the size pinnace that they were could carry about 50 people. Okay, so you've got the one ship of 50 people that takes off 5 days into. Nobody really knows why. And then you've got the one that disappears forever, being captained by a dead man, right? Well, if you read Francis Bacon's book, The New Atlantis, at the very beginning of the book, like the first couple paragraphs, it talks about, the whole book is about a small ship that gets lost at sea and then just randomly bumps into an island that nobody's ever heard of or seen. And it has this fully technologically advanced civilization that's has a freedom of religion, all these different inventions and stuff like that, right? Well,
you found Antarctica?
No, I think it was Oak. I think the New Atlantis, or this island, refers to Virginia, but I think there's a secret in the New Atlantis, a little code that I may have found, and it could be totally speculation. But at the beginning of the book, it says we left from the South Sea and traveled 5 weeks, I believe. I'm not going to get it. I don't remember it completely, but traveled west for 5 weeks and then got hit by a storm and traveled north with a point east. Okay. Well, so you would think that the South Sea would be China, but actually the like bay underneath Plymouth, it was called South Sea. So, and Plymouth is where the 1609 supply mission launched from. And so I think that's a little like double entendre there, that they left from the South Sea. It gets you thinking about the China South Sea, but I think it was South Sea, which is what they called the bay out near the English Channel underneath Plymouth, which is where the supply mission ran from. And then I looked at how long it would take to get over, and it took about the same amount of time in the book to get to around Bermuda, right? And then what happened about that time is a storm kicks up, a hurricane blows them off course. This one ship in particular, which is lost and nobody knows, assumed that it went down, and it you know, and they get blown off course with a northern heading with a point east. Well, if you leave Bermuda and you go straight north with a point east, you end up right here in Nova Scotia, right? What's interesting is they say that in the book there's 50 people on the boat. The pinnace held 50 people that was lost. And then also a thing that kind of supported what I was thinking was that when you draw a triangle, like a line from Oak Island to Bermuda to Jamestown and then back to Oak Island again, it is a perfect 800 mile by 800 mile by 800 mile triangle. And you'll see how important these stupid triangles are. They're everywhere in this town. And I think possibly and this is the huge thing. Okay, so the largest ship of the fleet, it crash lands itself on purpose at Bermuda, okay, in order to save everybody on board. Everybody survives. They all disembark, they get off the boat, and they stay on the island of Bermuda for a solid year, 10 months to a year, right? While they're on the island, they take apart the original boat, and with wood from the island, they build 2 more boats, the Patience and the Deliverance. Both of those words appear one time in the New Atlantis. And this is a book about Christian people who accidentally run into Christian people after being saved by them. And those 2 words are only words are only used once in the New Atlantis. They named the 2 boats the Patience and the Deliverance on Bermuda, right? And then they make those boats, and then a year later they finally make it back to Virginia. Well, that's so in 1609 the supply mission leaves. They're on the island of Bermuda for a year. They get back to the Virginia colony in 1610. In 1610, a guy named William Strachey, who was on the island of Bermuda, writes the entire account of the year that they spent on Bermuda and sends it to Francis Bacon's wife. In 1611, The Tempest is written by William Shakespeare. It is the last play that was ever written by Shakespeare, and it was written in 1611, but it is the very first play that appears in the first folio of Shakespeare, right? So it also in 1611, another and William Strachey, remember that Society of the Helmet that I told you about, Bacon's literary society? William Strachey was a member of said literary society. The play The Tempest by William Shakespeare was written in 1611, and it is all about a crash landing on a desert island, and the whole crew spends a bunch of time there. A whole bunch of weird esoteric stuff happens. My buddy Robert Frederick of The Hidden Life is Best has broken down like all the Shakespeare plays and pulled out all the Masonic symbolism and Bacon symbolism, and it's incredible. And so just a recap, the supply mission crash lands on Bermuda. They stay there for a year. They make it in 1610 to Virginia. This guy who's a buddy of Francis Bacon writes an account of what happened in Bermuda. That next year, The Tempest comes out. It's the last play ever written by Shakespeare, first one in his first folio. And it's 100% The Tempest is written about Bermuda, because not only is it a very similar kind of disaster, but there's like 4 or 5 names that are specifically of people, famous people who are on the island on that expedition, that are doubled up and used in the play The Tempest. And so that pulls that connection from Williamsburg and Virginia, Jamestown to Shakespeare to Bacon to Bermuda to the New Atlantis. I think I'm sure some of that was rambling, didn't make sense. So
I'm following you.
All right. So a lot of stuff happens.
I just keep using my computer.
Say what?
Oh, no, I said just use my computer. When you say something I don't know, I just do it.
Oh, okay. Am I still pretty close?
Yeah, you're on point, man.
Yeah.
Really
Good deal. All right. So
I'm learning a lot of shit.
We're gonna get into some weird alignments that don't make any sense, cannot be coincidental. And for this whole thing, you got to understand that, like I said, I believe that Virginia, the New World, is sort of a breakaway civilization for the Stuarts to maintain their bloodline. Okay. And within the Stuarts, you have the Merovingian bloodline. Within that, you've got a possible connection to the Templars. Obviously, from the Merovingians to the Templars to the Rosicrucians to the Royal Society and the Invisible College, and then on to Freemasonry. Well, Freemasonry officially goes live 1717. All right. It goes live, and one of the first Grand Master of the English Lodge is a guy named John Moray. Now, God, this is gonna get deep, but John Moray is a descendant of a guy named Thomas Moray, who was the caretaker of James the first Stuart king in England. So basically, again, I think Masonry has a through line all the way to the Stuarts. I think there's different factions now and even back then, but 1599 was the first charter for a Masonic lodge in Scotland. They don't go public with Masonry being a thing until 1717. My overarching theory is that the New World is a breakaway civilization for the Stuarts, and that more specifically here in Williamsburg, that the College of William and Mary was built by, created by Freemasons, folks of the mystery schools, and been stewarded by, even right up till present day, by Freemasons. Not overtly. I just think that they have some influence, some way to keep this symbolism continually from 1693 all the way to present day. They keep adding pieces to this campus that are undeniably symbolic and represent Freemasonic ideals and stories and things like that. So the first thing I noticed,
obviously see the big triangle right off the rip.
Yeah,
So they do right now.
you're finally gonna hear what it is. You've been looking at it. I'm so sorry.
You're good, man. This is crazy.
So the first thing that I noticed was, so where this triangle is represents the original historic campus of William and Mary. From this line here back was all like grazing fields and forest. This was the first land cleared. This triangle right here. The first building of William and Mary was this building here. You also might be looking at this side line of this triangle and be like, well, that doesn't really run down the road as perfectly as it does on this side. Well, if you look back at the oldest map that we have of Williamsburg, it's called the Frenchman's map. I want to say from 1740s. It shows these roads, and this bump out right here of the road is not there. This road goes straight down this line, exactly where my line is, right up against this house, because back then they weren't dealing with Chevys and Toyotas and stuff. They were horses and buggies. So you could come right up against the house with the road, and actually they preferred it. So this line represents exactly where this road used to be. Now this road here is called Jamestown Road, and this road here is called Richmond Road. This road runs all the way to the original Jamestown settlement. This road runs all the way to Richmond, Virginia, which was the second settlement in the colony. Now, not only that, they both run up and meet right here at the very apex of this triangle. Starts the Duke of Gloucester Street. Now, Duke of Gloucester Street is the main thoroughfare of Williamsburg. Now, when this land was chosen to be the site of William and Mary, at that point it was only plantation land, and it was owned, this particular piece of it was called Middle Plantation at the time. And right up here you've got Bruton Parish Episcopal Church. Now that was the first Anglican church there, built in like the 1600s. And this is where Marie Bauer Hall, the wife of Manly P. Hall, the probably most prolific esoteric Freemason in the history of America, his wife decoded some Shakespeare and some tombstones and was able to find them their original footprint and foundation of this church that had been lost, and claimed that there was a vault 20 feet underneath where the original bell tower was, that contained contained something having to do with Francis Bacon, some sort of possibly Shakespearean manuscripts, Francis Bacon's lost papers.
This is the Marie Bauer Hall you're talking about?
Yeah. So interestingly enough, she does this in the 1920s. Okay.
Is she okay? So I'm gonna bring up a name. You're pretty deep into your history right now, and I'm going for episode 314 right now, and he's deep. So, have you ever heard of the Pesar family?
Pesar?
Yeah.
Is that one of those like Venetian families that like the black nobility families?
Yes, like one of the higher ups or the 13 families that kind of control like that. They're not part of the 13; they're above them, kind of thing.
Right.
Like,
the ones you never hear of.
Correct.
Right.
They said that from hearing in a podcast that I listened to and what I know about him, the Bauer name. This is why I asked you. And the Bauer name was one of the names of that was like how they married into or they changed their name when they came over from England or wherever they came from. They used the Bauer name. So I'm wondering if there's any relation to that.
Well, I'm not sure with her, but I also know that, the Bauer name is the name of the Rothschilds. That was
okay. That might be what I'm thinking.
That was,
Okay.
Bauer was the Rothschilds' original name. And I can't remember what their business was, but they had the name Bauer on a red shield outside of their business.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where Rothschild came from. Red Shield, Rothschild.
Red Shield, yep.
And so, you would assume possibly that she has some connections back, but I haven't really dug into her. Only that her husband is Manly P. Hall, who wrote the Wisdom of All Ages. I mean, he wrote everything that Freemasons and conspiracy theorists point to, the secret teachings of all ages, America's secret history, maybe. I can't remember. But anyway, she decoded some stuff and said that there was a right about here that there was a vault 20 feet down that was 20 foot by 20 foot by 20 feet. And there was something really important there having to do with Francis Bacon. Now, at this point, Williamsburg, this is in the 1920s. At this point, Williamsburg was a rundown southern town that nobody cared about. It had kind of, the capital had moved to Richmond. It was no longer an important place, really. And so she makes this discovery, or she claims that there's this discovery, and what happens? But all of a sudden, the Rockefellers swoop in, buy the entire town, kick everybody out of their houses, and then renovate and turn the entire town into the living museum that it is today. And they started with the campus of William and Mary. And to this day, you can't plant a garden or dig a hole. If you live, now there is some residential properties within the greater like Colonial Williamsburg area, but you can't, without the express written consent of Major League Baseball or the Rothschilds, you can't dig a hole in your backyard to fix a plumbing pipe. They have a Rockefeller Foundation lawyer in Williamsburg at all times, stationed there.
Right.
And I find it interesting that after she makes this claim, they swoop in and take control of the whole town. Can you guess where they were doing the exact same thing right before then?
Right.
Another city in another country. It was Stratford upon Avon, where the pretender William Shagspar was from. So they come doing the exact same thing, making a massive tourist history trap where they are in control of the history. Now, remember that the Rockefellers not only controlled the history books by being in charge of literally textbook making, but building curriculums for colleges at that time. They're also the same people who controlled medicine. They, basically helped to outlaw herbal doctors and homeopathic doctors back then, and push everything towards petroleum-based medicine by going to Johns Hopkins, dumping a bunch of money into it, creating a medical school, and then the American Medical Association. So the Rockefellers at this point are in charge of history in the United States. They're in charge of medicine in the United States. They're also the same people who never cared about people having a drink, but at the point right there in the 20s is when automobiles were being created and using gasoline, except for that all the farmers who were buying this motorized farm equipment started to realize that, oh, we could just take our byproduct, our waste, our vegetables and things like that, ferment them, turn it into alcohol, and that'll burn in our gas tanks, and we have a self-sustaining like process here. Well, all of a sudden, right at that time when that starts happening, the Rockefellers dump a bunch of money into the temperance movement, which had been going on for decades. There had been women marching for decades trying to get the government to do something about their husbands who were drinking the family, nest egg away, right? The Rockefellers were never into that at all until all of a sudden people started realizing they didn't need their oil. And that's when they dump millions into the temperance movement, and here comes prohibition. So right there in the 20s, the Rockefellers take over. They take over history. They take over medicine. They take over college curriculum. They take over, the oil industry. So they're selling, like they're an oil family. So they're selling it in their medicine. They're selling it in their, for automobiles, and they're spreading their influence all over the country. And in my view, creating the history that is taught today. Also, when they do this, their first in Williamsburg, their first sort of proof of concept, their beginning to the renovation was to get William and Mary back in order. And the guy the architect that they tapped to do that is a guy named Charles M. Robinson, who is a pretty prolific Virginia architect, and he was a huge Freemason. Not only did he build this and is responsible for a bunch of the symbolism that I swear to God I'm about to show you, but he also the number 6 lodge in Williamsburg, which was the original Masonic lodge in Williamsburg, fell into disrepair and was just gone at that point. They had moved to another building. He went back and this architect rebuilt the entire lodge with his own money and then gifted it to the Freemasonic Lodge. He also built what's called Altria Theater in Richmond. It used to be called the Mosque. It's like a big venue. Now it's beautiful. It's this massive theater, and it's just filled with Masonic symbolism. And that's because when Charles M. Robinson built it, it was at that time, the largest Masonic meeting house in all of North America. All right, I'm going to shut up, but not really. And I'm going to show you some of these alignments. I'm just going to get right to it. This right here, this triangle here, is an exact encode of the Great Pyramid of Giza, period. This bottom line represents where the edge of that building was. And then you have these the 2 oldest roads in America, create the 2 sides of the pyramid. This base here is the exact base, the exact distance of the base of the Great Pyramid of Giza. This here, these sides are the exact measurement of the sides of the Great Pyramid of Giza. If you measure from the apex of this triangle down to right here, this is now the bell tower at the campus of William and Mary. In the original Sir Christopher Wren building, one of the first members of the 1717 Lodge of England. So basically one of the founding fathers of Freemasonry. It's was supposedly designed by him, but at the very least it was named for him and designed from his designs. But this bell tower here was not always a bell tower. When it was originally built, it was North America's first astronomical observatory, the type of thing that people would need to study the stars and to help navigate and do cartography and to do stuff like this. Because if you draw a line straight down the side of this William and Mary pyramid, and you follow it all the way over to the Giza Plateau. It lands directly on top. Scroll and zoom. Scroll and zoom. It lands directly on top of the Great Pyramid of Giza.
Wow.
Shit.
Oh
Yeah.
shit!
And not only does it land right on the top, on the tip of it, it runs down the exact same side that it runs down
Jesus.
at William and Mary. Now, this could be coincidence. The pyramid being the same measurements, that could be a coincidence. It's a triangle. There's triangles built into the, landscape of any, cityscape. But for it to land here,
On
and
the
then
same ley line like that, or whatever the hell you would call it. It's
exactly, there's
crazy.
no chance. If I move this over to this pyramid, it does not go back to Williamsburg and intersect. And keep
Isn't
the
there
same
isn't there
line.
rumors that like Virginia, like that whole area, the Carolinas and stuff, was actually like ancient Egypt? Like there's old mappings.
Yeah,
of
there's
that.
that old kind of yeah. I mean, who knows? And who knows?
Even Musk brings it up once, I think,
Yeah,
in an interview.
I mean, there's something here. There's a reason for this. Now I'm going to show you a lot of symbolism, but again, this was the original layout. Now, if you're building a college and you're getting the charter directly from King William and Queen Mary and naming it after them, you know that this is going to be a piece of land that will not change. This will
Right.
stay here forever, right? And they built it specifically. It's kind of a goofy place to put a college. You know what I mean? In this weird triangle of land. But I think it was done purposely, obviously. And the guy that they bought.
Well, it was the first thing there, so everything else is built around it.
Yeah. And the guy that they bought, the only thing that was there was basically that church, these two roads coming to a point like this, and like farmland.
Yeah.
And the guy that they bought this particular piece of land from for the college was a guy named Captain John Page. Now, the Page family, from what I can tell, comes from the Pajam family. The Pajam family comes from the south of France. Now, the south of France was heavy where the Templars came from, right? And what did the Templars in the south of France do when they got outlawed? They got the hell out of France because King Philip the Fair of France was the one who was persecuting them. And where did they go? They went to Scotland and they went to England. So the Pajam family turns from noble French knights in the south of France, and then right around the 1200s, the late 1200s, early 1300s, right when the Templars are outlawed, that family moves into England, which was somewhat of a fairly a safe haven for them, at least at the beginning. Okay, so now also I'm looking at this this pyramid early on, and I'm watching a lot of Oak Island, and I start to realize there's some interesting coincidences between William and Mary, or Williamsburg and William and Mary and Oak Island. One of the main things is, and I'm going to be doing a podcast just on this guy, an early, right around, actually, he was one of the guys who created William and Mary. The governor, the colonial governor of Williamsburg, or Virginia at the time, was a guy named Francis Nicholson. Now, Francis Nicholson had been a governor of the Massachusetts Bay Colony. He was the governor of the Massachusetts Bay Colony right after a guy named Sir William Phipps went from being a ne'er-do-well guy to becoming a sailor to becoming the captain of a ship, and then giving paperwork to be able to be a privateer and to go down near Hispaniola and loot a sunken Spanish galleon that had 6 tons of silver on it, right? So this guy, Sir William Phipps, gets the go-ahead from the Queen of the King and Queen of England to go down to the shipwreck and recover all of this silver, right? But, you know, of course, the crown is supposed to get it. Well, there was 6 tons of silver, and he only brought 3 tons back to England. Nobody ever knows what happened to the other 3 tons of silver. He says that they weren't able to get it all, and they had to leave some there, and then they could never find it again. Well, I find it interesting that Sir William Phipps does this, and the very next year, Francis Nicholson becomes the governor of the Massachusetts Bay Colony, where William Phipps is based out of. Not only that, when he leaves the Massachusetts Bay Colony, he becomes the governor of Virginia and creates William and Mary, right? And then later on, he becomes the governor of Nova Scotia.
Yeah,
now,
this is crazy.
Now, one of the biggest theories, one of the best theories of what was buried there at Oak Island is the silver from the William Phipps treasure.
When did he go excavate the treasure again? What year?
So 1689 is when Sir William Phipps went and got 88 is when he went and got the treasure. He brings it over to, he brings half of it to England. And then 1689 is when Francis Nicholson becomes the governor there.
Yeah.
And then what's funny is then he leaves there, goes to Virginia, helps create William and Mary. And who takes over and becomes the governor after Francis Nicholson in the Massachusetts Bay Colony? Sir William Phipps. Okay. And then after he's the governor of Virginia, he requests and becomes the governor of Nova Scotia, which they had recently taken back from the French, right? Now, another funny connection to that is there's not much known about Francis Nicholson. He kind of had like a kind of a noble sponsor over in England who helped him get commissions in the military, but he was not of noble birth. But he really got some sweet gigs. He had some issues over here in the colonies, and he kind of jumped around to different places. Half of that, I think, was what he wanted to do. I think that he helped William Phipps with a place to store that treasure. And I think it shows that by him then becoming the governor, having been the governor. Anyway, what's really interesting, there's not much known about Francis Nicholson's family. Now, Francis Nicholson also helped create the layout of Annapolis, which is rife with esoteric symbolism. The rest of Williamsburg, he laid out, and they people like Court Lindahl refer to this layout like Paris as like a New Jerusalem layout. But the only thing known about Francis Nicholson, the governor of Virginia and Nova Scotia and Massachusetts Bay Colony, the only thing that's known about his family is that he had a sister and that she lived in Nova Scotia and that her last name was Phipps. Now, supposedly it wasn't Phipps, the guy who found the treasure, because there's this great love story about how he had this wife and she married him and she was way above his station and blah, blah, blah. But I find it really interesting that these guys who are back-to-back governors of Massachusetts Bay, and then what I'm about to show you. Anyway, so lots of connections with Francis Nicholson and William Phipps, who's the best theory of what's buried at Oak Island. On top of that, very early on in the Jamestown history, 1613, and remember, that's in that time where everybody's dying, everybody's starving. They've got it really rough in Jamestown. Regardless of that, in 1613, they decide that they need to take a whole bunch of the men from the Jamestown fort and go up to Nova Scotia and take it back from the French. One of the several times that it went back and forth between the French and the English. So I find that interesting. I also find interesting that the reason Oak Island is called Oak Island is because it was at one point covered in red and live oaks, right? Now, those oaks do not grow above the Mason-Dixon line.
Yeah, this was crazy to me.
Yeah.
I
So
didn't know this until you said that.
yeah, the red and live oaks do not grow above the Mason-Dixon line. They are a southern tree, right? But and they were once, they covered the entire island, which means they were planted there. And so much so that there are 400 islands in Mahone Bay, which is the bay that Oak Island sits in. Okay. There's not a single red or live oak ever been found, or evidence of one ever found on any of the other 400 islands. But it was covered. I mean, modern day, they brought botanists in, dug down, found old stumps, and been like, not only was this place covered in red and live oaks, but it was also, they were cultivated. Well, guess what the first trees were that were cultivated on the campus of William and Mary? By, and I'll say this too, by Sir Christopher Wren, one of the founders of Freemasonry and the Royal Society. He sent his landscaper over to Williamsburg, and one of the first trees that were cultivated on the campus of William and Mary were live oaks and red oaks, including, if you can see my cursor, this tree and this tree. These are two similar oaks that are two of the oldest on the property, and they've been there for a very long time. And they kind of, like I said, not only does this bottom line of this pyramid kind of border what the original landscape was, but it also is the back line. This building was supposed to be a square with a courtyard in the middle, but they supposedly ran out of money and they never finished the square. And even Thomas Jefferson, when he was the president of the college, he tried to continue it. And right where this line sits is when they excavated in the 2000s, they found Thomas Jefferson's foundations that they had laid, but then the revolution started and he couldn't finish it. Sure. So I get all these connections with Oak Island and Williamsburg, and I listened to that Petter Almanson guy who goes on there, that brilliant dude from one of the Nordic countries who decoded all the Francis Bacon and Shakespeare and all that stuff. And what he found was a Kabbalistic tree of life based on the Nolan's cross at Oak Island, right? And when he found that, they went to the different points that he found, and they found very significant evidence of this formation on Oak Island, right? So I start looking at William and Mary, and I see now that there's Tree of Life, Kabbalah Tree of Life images built into a lot of different. I've seen a lot of them in different cityscapes. Yeah. None of them are as perfect as the one that is right here at William and Mary. This is like textbook. You Google a picture of a Kabbalistic tree of life. The proportions are exact, including the 5-sided star that's here. And not only that, when you're looking at Kabbalah, okay, and the tree of life, now you've got one, for some reason, when you save your measurements on Google Earth, they shove everything underneath the trees, but there should be one here, and then a line coming up to here, and then obviously 1, 2, 3. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then Tiphereth would be right here to make 10, and then also there's a secret or a hidden. They called each of these points on the tree of life Sephirot. It's like a Hebrew word that means different points in these pathways to the different aspects of God. That's what the tree of life is supposed to be, right? What's interesting about Kabbalah, or the tree of life within Kabbalah, is that, like I said, it's supposed to represent, each of these are different. They've got a different name for each Sephirot, and they all are different aspects of God. Okay. And then the paths in between them are the paths that you travel between the different aspects of God. And the whole point is to get all the way up to this last Sephirot, which is Kether, and it means crown. Now, what's cool is that on the left side, so these are considered pillars on the tree of life in Kabbalah. Okay. 1 and 2. Now, the left side of the tree of life in Kabbalah is considered the feminine side, and the right side is considered the masculine side. Well, the original female housing was on the left side, and the male housing was on the right side. Okay. And the whole point here is there's the masculine and the feminine side of God, and that they come together at the last point, which is the crown.
Yeah.
And it's a marriage of the masculine feminine within the Godhead, right? Well, what a better, I mean, could there be any better building to sit? And this, like I said, this was supposed to be a square. So actually, I know this point seems kind of arbitrary, but it actually sits right in the middle of that courtyard, right? But what better building could be the first building of the College of William and Mary, literally a college named after a masculine and feminine king and queen, something that didn't happen a lot, two masculine and feminine ruling together. And it's the Sephiroth that is represented here is called crown. It's the Hebrew word is kether. And so you've literally got a building named after Sir Christopher Wren, a Mason, right?
Mhm.
And it's named, the whole building or the whole school is named for the masculine and feminine monarchy in England. Now, the other thing that's cool, and this will play later when I get to some other things, is you'll see how interesting this is when I get some more lines on here. But there should be a Sephiroth here. There should be a point here and here. And when I started putting this together, I was like bummed out. I was like, man, it's just kind of in the middle of the grass. You know what I mean? There's no like landmark here that would point out these Sephiroth, right? So I'm like, whatever. And I start trying to make more connections. This Sephiroth here is Tippereth, and it means beauty. And it actually, where all these lines connect is where that Sephiroth is supposed to sit. And just by happenstance, where all these lines intersect, this is the exact middle of this garden, the Sunken Garden, which was created and designed by Charles M. Robinson, that Freemasonic architect. So I go over to Oak Island and I draw a line from Oak Island to William and Mary. And I go through two Sephiroth perfectly through two Sephiroth from here up through this one. And I go all the way over to Nova Scotia. And it lands right on Oak Island. But not only does it land on Oak Island, it lands on this tip right here. Where at the end of this? No. You ever heard of Nolan's Cross?
Oh, yeah, Nolan's Cross. Okay.
That's Nolan's Cross.
All
That's
right.
the exact measurement of Nolan's Cross at Oak Island. Now,
these are the boulders that they find,
massive
right?
boulders, couple tons each, that are proven to be hand hewn into a cone shape. You've got a boulder here, a boulder here. There's one down here somewhere, and there's one down here, and then there's one out here and one here. And my line runs all the way through and lands on one of those boulders. So I'm like, holy crap. Is there a connection to Nolan's Cross at William and Mary? Okay. And so I go back to William and Mary and I start looking for, now I wish I could pull up another screen without having to like go back and forth. Because
this is great.
I have the dimensions of Nolan's Cross on my PowerPoint here. So I'm gonna pull those up for myself. And there we go. So from the top of the cross to the cross section of the cross, you need to find 145 feet. That's the distance from the the very tip top of the cross to where the crossbar of the cross goes across. If I say cross one more time, I'm gonna lose my mind. So I'm looking all over the place to find just some landmark that's 145 feet from another landmark. What I find is two of the oldest things here. This statue, which is of Lord Botetourt, Governor Norburn Berkeley, who was a Freemason and also
Of course.
designed and commissioned the Master Mason's chair for the number 6 lodge that later on in the 20s was rebuilt by the Masonic architect. From his statue, which has been here for a long time and has been moved several times. They had to like move it during the Civil War. They had to move it during the Revolutionary War so that its head got cut off by a student one time. This particular statue here isn't even the actual statue. They moved the original historic statue into the library at William and Mary and then put a reproduction here. But it is exactly 145 feet from the front door of the Wren building to that statue. So I'm like, crap, there's my 145 feet, right?
Yeah.
So then the next measurement you need is the crossbar. And each side of the crossbar is 360 feet. Well, when you measure out from the front door
So
to the church, to the edge, just to the edge of the oldest road in the country, the 2 oldest roads in the country, it's exactly 360 feet. Then you've got from the crossbar down to the next point, right? And that's 429 feet. All right. So I'm like, all right, well, it's just going to end up in the middle of like the sunken garden and there's no landmarks there, right? Well, I didn't realize this until very recently when I put all of these alignments together, when I finally had the Tree of Life laid over the top of the campus. What I found out is roughly right around where this hidden Sephiroth should be. And I'm not dead on over here. I'm probably a few feet off on the thing, but I've measured it all out. It used to show all the measurements at all the points, but right here around this is between 129 and 135 feet. And that's where that and this one down here are the only 2 places where it should be. That last one. Sorry, go ahead.
That big open area is the sunken garden where you just said.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's okay.
And then from this, sorry, let's see here.
Am I kind of seeing the Freemason symbol between all these lines too?
Possibly. I mean, you've got a 5-sided pentacle here. You also, if you look at this road here, it looks an awful lot like the square and the compass. And originally, very early on, they had 2 roads that came back behind here, which would make the square, and then this would be the compass.
Yep.
So you've got the cross. Shit. This measures up. It falls each point where those boulders are at Oak Island. They fall right in these 2 Sephiroth, intersect those lines. These lines are the exact measurement. This line is the exact measurement. So I'm like, okay, well, there's a Tree of Life and a cross here. Maybe there is a where is it at now? Maybe there's a cool Tree of Life over in Nova Scotia. And so I go back here and I just overlay that.
Anthony and Mike, are you guys familiar with the Oak Island show at all or anything like that?
No, I know you.
No, but I've been looking it up.
So allegedly there's a buried treasure there. These 2 brothers have been looking for it, but there's so much, they're finding so much like tunnels underground and like.
And it's not only the Lagina brothers who are doing it now. Ever since, so this is very interesting too, because it was the early crap. I'm going to forget the dates now, but within the same few decades, I believe, of William and Mary being built. No, I'm sorry. So there was a kid who lived on the mainland of Nova Scotia. He could see Oak Island from his house. It was an abandoned island. Nobody really did anything over there. I believe it was in the 1790s. And one night he sees lanterns and lamps over on the island, and he's like, "What the hell is going on?" So the story is that him and his buddy wait till the and there had already been stories up, the golden age of pirates was the early 1700s. So there were buried treasure stories all over the Northeast, because that's generally where the pirates came from. They came from the colonies, and then they went down into the Caribbean, plundered all the Spanish ships and stuff, and then cruised back up to the Northeast and the East Coast of America to hide their stuff and to spend their money. And so these kids, his name was Daniel McGinnis, he sees these lights. They wait till the lights go away. They paddle over there in a canoe, and they're walking through the island, and where they saw the lights coming from, they get to an oak tree, a huge oak tree, and they look up, and there's a block and tackle, like a pulley system above them, and a depression in the ground below them. They start digging down. Every time they get 10 feet down, there's a platform of oak logs, and they do that all the way till they get to 90 feet, and there is a stone of granite with an inscription written on it. And but then once they get below that, it starts filling up with water, and they have to get out of there. Ever since the 1790s, when those kids found that depression and started digging, people have been on that island trying to find whatever.
They can't find that spot, and they can't find. They allegedly found the one like piece of that stone or something like that.
Yeah,
a couple of years ago, but they've never found like the complete stone. They found like part of it in someone's basement or some wild shit.
But they have found. I mean, there is absolutely no doubt that there's a intricate series of tunnels, man-made tunnels built under there, that the island has been used by since the Middle Ages all the way up to present day. I mean, they find Roman artifacts, they find
French,
1700s, they find like Templar metal, they find, I mean,
the digging. You mentioned that earlier, that the Templars were diggers. They are, and that's what makes me think that they had somewhat involvement in that.
Not only that, their ancestors and the people in the Bruce and Stuart line, the Merovingian line, they're diggers. In fact, I was just listening to another, going back and listening to some more episodes of Court Lindahl's show, and he talks about there was an earl or a duke in Scotland who had an under the ocean, off the coast of Scotland, an underground coal mine as early as the early 1600s, because he gave King James the first Stuart king, a tour of that literally under the water and under the ground, under the water, a coal mine that had to have this intricate series of like air holes and suction holes that would keep the water out. So these, specifically the Stuarts, who I think come from the Merovingians, they're hiding some secret, or they're at least pretending that they're from a bloodline to imbue, because their whole thing, the Stuart royalty, the Merovingian royalty, their whole thing is this concept of the divine right of kings. Like, we are kings because God says that we should be kings.
I'm going to dive into the Stuarts. I don't know much about them, but I'm definitely going to get into it.
I think they're everything, man. They've been balls deep in everything since the early days. So there's something here, but my theory is, just like this supposed vault underneath the Bruton Chapel Church, and this isn't just my theory, but that there were a lot of places around the globe that were almost safety deposit boxes for starting off the Templars who needed to hide all their treasure, but then also, going into the Stuarts who needed to fund these revolutions. They kept getting kicked out of monarchies and having to go like be in exile in France for a while, and then they'd come back and take their throne back, and then they get kicked out, and then they, you know what I mean? So
Right.
they needed a place to amass their wealth, and I think there were several places. I think Williamsburg was one of them early on. I think Oak Island was one that was known, and you got to remember too that the Templars took off with 18 ships, and they were gone. They never found those ships, and they never found what was on them. So not only did they go probably hide that stuff somewhere, they also spent a lot of time on those ships discovering a place where they weren't going to be burnt at the stake like their comrades were.
Right. So back in 1609, when they Saint Voyage and the one big ship broke off,
yeah,
was there Knights Templar on that ship?
So the Knights Templar have been outlawed for exactly 300 years at that point.
Oh shit.
So 1307 is when the Pope and the King of France outlaw the Templars. 1607 is when their descendants come over to the New World.
Gotcha. Okay. Because I was thinking maybe that's when like there was Templars on those boats, and that's when they knew about Oak Island, so they told them that.
Well, that's that small boat that broke off, that I think its coordinates and stuff are sort of secreted into Bacon's New Atlantis.
Mm-hmm.
I think that they maybe had something on that ship, some reason to head up north, or they sunk and everybody drowned and died. But it's interesting that a dead man was supposedly the captain. Okay, so now I'm gonna get weird on you. So we've got the
Gonna get weird.
Yeah, it's gonna get
loved
weird
it
and creepy. So we've got the Oak Island connections and the Masonic symbolism and connections, and I started looking at the overall landscape of the bigger, college, which includes some modern elements. Now, if you look at this this landscape right here, you can see a very clear triangle, right?
Yeah.
All right. So I start off and I put a triangle around this triangle and this triangle, and I just start looking up esoteric triangles. And what I find is this thing from antiquity called the Tetractys. Now, let me read to you real quick what
I'm running out of room on my page here for notes, man. This is getting crazy.
Good deal. So the Tetractys, I see the word. It looks like it's Greek or Latin or something. It's got to be something interesting. So I look it up, and what it is the Tetractys or tetrad, or the Tetractys of the decad, is a triangular figure consisting of 10 points arranged in 4 rows, 1, 2, 3, and 4 points in each row, which is the geometrical representation of the 4th triangular number. A mystical symbol, it was very important to the secret worship of Pythagoreanism. There were 4 seasons, and the number was also associated with planetary motions and music. Well, then I found out that it was a Greek Pythagorean, like, mathematical cult that, like, used the Tetractys. But then I also found out that it was adopted into Kabbalah and works hand in hand with the tree of life. And in Kabbalah, the Tetractys is a mystical symbol used by the Pythagoreans and Kabbalah followers to represent the 4 classical elements, and is a triangular figure consisting of 10 points arranged in 4 levels. In Kabbalah, the 10 points of the Tetractys represent the 10 Sephirot, or the 10 faces of God. The followers of Kabbalah have also linked the Tetractys with the Tetragrammaton, which is the manner by which the name of God is spoken. Now, in this way, each of the point. This is basically a math problem.
This shit is crazy.
So just like the Pythagoreans, the followers of Kabbalah also
and
believe,
pay attention, and
I'm with you.
just like the Pythagoreans, the followers of Kabbalah also believe that the Tetractys is an illustration. Is an illustration. Lost my spot. Of existence, of the way everything is structured in the universe. However, the followers of Kabbalah have paralleled the Tetractys again with the tree of life. I just spilt Copenhagen spit on my phone while I was reading that to you guys.
it'll be all right.
Yum.
It'll be all right,
Got
man.
it.
So hey, hold on. 3, 2, good.
So 1.2 point, 1, 2, 3 points, 1, 2, 4 points. Well, the very center of this thing lands right here in Tippereth. Well, in the Tetractys, this point also means beauty. It's the bottom of Nolan's cross. It is the Tippereth Sephirot in the tree of life, which also means beauty. And then just to creep you out real quick, and then we can turn this off.
Yeah, we gotta definitely run this back to a part 2 for next
man.
week. This is awesome.
I
I don't normally take a lot of notes, bro, and I'm not even shitting you. I got a whole page of notes going over here, so.
I love it.
I start measuring the sides of.
Definitely cool.
God, it's doing this stupid thing again. They're sick. The measurement of each of these triangles is 666 by 666 by 666.
Of course it is.
And it's not just so every single one of these lines is 666. And that is just the tip of the iceberg with 666 measurements all over this campus. The sunken garden is exactly 666 feet diagonally from end to end, which also crosses right here. Statues, there's statues that are connected by a perfect diamond, which every side is 666. And obviously, 666 to Masons is the seal of Solomon. It's represented in the Star of David, which is actually the Star of Renfan, which is actually the symbol of the god Baal, which they which is what the Hebrews, when they were lost in the desert, when he goes up on the hill to talk to God and get the 10 Commandments, when he comes back down, they're worshiping a big golden calf. They're worshiping Renfan. It's Baal. It's child sacrifice worship. So not necessarily saying that's why Masons use it, but it's also the 666 is associated with Solomon. The Masons love Solomon. That's kind of their kind of made up ish backstory. And Solomon, the first time the number 666 is spoken in the Bible, is the amount of taxes that Solomon received was 666 talents of silver. So
Shit,
that's
crazy.
That's their thing.
Man.
That is crazy, Ernie. This is awesome, man.
I mean,
we
we
gotta-
could just kind of pause recording if you guys want and just continue this and just.
I think we drop
a part
1, part 2. People aren't going to listen to 4 hours.
I want to hear a little bit more about more about other parts of Virginia, a little bit about Roanoke.
Yeah, I want to get more and all of that. I want to get.
We'll get my
the what is it? The Flat Hat Society and all that stuff.
That too.
Yeah.
I had that up actually on my notes.
We can talk about Phi Beta Kappa, the first Greek letter
There's so much.
societies.
We didn't even scratch the surface, man. We really.
That's
Virginia, man. You can't, like, it's an octopus, man. It's
this knowledge, though, man. Your knowledge, the retention is pretty impressive.
Pretty incredible for sure, man.
Tell my wife that, man.
No doubt. But hey, let our listeners know where they can find you and check out your page and check you guys out.
Absolutely.
I know you guys bring your co-host on next week if Dan can make it. Absolutely.
Yeah, he'll be able to make it next week. So you can get see us at I'm gonna do it real quick so that I don't screw it up. So we are Virginia is for crap. I'm gonna screw this up
because this is the slogan of your state right here anyway, man. It's the conspiracy part, but
yeah. But of course I'm an idiot and I did you know, our Instagram page, our Facebook page, and our YouTube page are all named different things because I'm an idiot.
Yep.
So YouTube is at VA Con Lovers Podcast, all one word. Our Instagram is, I think, VA Con Lovers too. Put it up real quick. It is VA Conspiracy Lovers on Instagram, and then Facebook is, I gotta change all this. I'm an idiot. On Facebook, it's Virginia is for Conspiracy Lovers, not all one word. And like I said, we film every one that we do, so all of our episodes are up on YouTube, and I do a lot of visuals and stuff. So
That's
cool,
awesome.
man.
I can't thank you guys enough for having me, man. It was really fun.
Oh, I had a blast, man.
Yeah,
I have more.
keep doing
I
it.
have a ton of questions for you, man. I definitely.
Yeah, we're
looking
just
forward to
running out of
another
time.
episode.
I get up at 3:00 in the morning for work, so I'm
I
getting
feel
a
you,
little
dude.
depressed out here. So
Are you East Coast or are you West Coast?
He's in
Ernie?
Virginia.
We're
East Coast.
oh,
in
okay.
Virginia.
Obvious. Oh my God, Virginia. Okay. Yeah.
Where were you at for the last 2 hours?
It's getting late, man. I get it.
No,
he's
I
at William and Mary, man. He's at William and Mary. But no, awesome episode. Go check his page out. We appreciate everybody tuning in and get ready to close this bad boy out. We
Yes,
appreciate
sir.
everybody tuning in. Make sure you guys like, subscribe, share, leave us a rating on the, Apple and Spotify, wherever you can. And we appreciate everybody tuning in. Check us out next week with another episode to finish this off, man. We're just scratching the surface, so we're gonna go deep next episode. So tune in. Appreciate you. Peace. Follow the breadcrumbs, follow moonlight schemes. Hidden agendas ain't as crazy as they seem. Voices in the dark, amplifying dreams.